if there was anything where people miss on sleep, it's the psychology, right? All this data and the science and the, the different whys and actually the mechanisms that are happening is kind of irrelevant. And the most important thing is your thought process and the feeling you have surrounding sleep. And it was super impactful. And so after that, I just went on a full-blown, journey down this path, because as I started to speak on this to athletes and companies, the feedback and the amount you can impact someone's quality of life and their performance, it's the biggest bang for your buck. Like, you will not find something more impactful than sleep. And when you think about like the buckets of health, right? You have like people who usually do like, activity or workouts, they have nutrition, maybe it's mental health or maybe like hydration. There's a bunch of stuff there. And people usually put sleep as one of those buckets or pillars. And I would consider sleep the foundation of health and wellness, because sleep impacts every single bucket, where these other buckets they can kind of be in a silo, right? There's different ways to, tweak your nutrition, different workouts, different strategies. Sleep is sleep, right? And it impacts people, almost the same across the board. And so it's really the best place to start when you peel back the layers and try to, whether it's just feeling good or hitting a performance goal. And the reason I think that athletes are the focus is because there's no difference from an athlete to your general population. It's just the goals are hyper-focused and it's easy to measure. So it's so much better to start with them as far as strategies and studies and things like that, because the data usually expands when you apply it to general population. Like if it works in an athlete who's already so dialed in and trying to achieve this like extraordinary goal, when you apply it to someone that is in the regular world, they're not an athlete, or they don't have these high performance goals, it's usually even more impactful. So I think sometimes people think, oh, well, they're talking about athletes, it doesn't apply to me. Well, it really does, because the same traits, qualities, attributes that make you a phenomenal athlete also make you a great person, which you wouldn't think, but they really do. They all are interrelated. Even like power, like grip strength. It's insane, some of the longevity studies on grip strength. They really are connected.
Talk more about what you just said of people don't think it, affects them as a leader or their emotional. I just think that one is one where it just hits you in the heart. Like, oh, I'm actually being less of a good person by not sleeping. Truly.
It's interesting. And it's really wild the way that our society has painted sleep for a long time. And when you think about it, sleep is really the foundation of your mental health. And the majority of side effects or symptoms from being chronically underslept are subconscious actions, meaning reaction time, your ability to communicate emotion, your facial expressions, your ability to read facial expressions, reaction time, things like that. Those are all things that you can't really sense, you can't out-tough, you can't push through it. It's not really the feeling of being sleepy. That's a little bit irrelevant when you look at the grand scope of what's impacted by sleep. So when you look at it, when people are underslept, one of the first things that's impacted is your decision making, your mood stability, your response to certain emotions. So when you think about being a leader, a coach, an athlete, a CEO, the biggest thing, a parent, it's like when you're not sleeping well, you're really being like 75% yourself. You're not going to be as empathetic. You're not going to communicate effectively. You're not going to be trusted as much because your emotions are a little erratic. And trust comes from consistency in the way that you respond to different situations. And then when you look at a team, the foundation of any team is trust. There's so many studies, books on that. So if you don't have trust, you don't have anything as far as a team goes. And there are studies showing when a leader is underslept, there's actually less trust throughout the organization or team across the board.
Just so crazy.
Because you can't predict how the person's going to respond, their emotion. You're really not yourself. When you're not sleeping efficiently, you are not yourself. You're not going to respond the way you want. You're not going to have the energy. People aren't really going to know what to expect because you're communicating, suboptimally. And I don't think people think about that. They think like being the best parent, coach, whatever it is, leader, sometimes is putting in more time, and being the best leader is about putting in the best time, not about the most.
Yeah.
I relate to all of that so much, especially I'm just thinking of newborn days. Yeah. And I think my postpartum depression was so bad. And I'll speak for me personally, but I think it's just because there's so much guilt because you're so happy and like you have everything you've ever wanted.
Yep.
And yet there's this piece of you that is like, then why do I feel like this? And it's everything you've been saying. It's just the psychology of sleep and simply not getting enough sleep and the way that that affects you on like so many different levels. So I want to get into a little bit more about, we know how important it is. We know it impacts all of us. So how do we get better sleep?
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times when I'm asked that, well, I really branch it into two sides, but a lot of times when I'm asked that, people are looking for things like blackout shades and what temperature and things like that. And we can talk about that. But again, the most important piece is your relationship with your bedroom, sleep, and how you feel. Like when you physically think about going to bed, what's the feeling that comes into your head? And that feeling needs to be a feeling of calm and restfulness, because as soon as that changes, you're going to have a tough time. And so everybody is going to have a little bit different, more personalized plan in how exactly you get to that thought process. But what people need to be aware of is as soon as you start walking yourself down a plank of starting feeling uneasy and anxiety in surrounding your bedroom or sleep in general when you get into bed, you need to change the situation. That's the biggest thing to point out. You're never going to sleep better by worrying about it more, right? And that's what a lot of people do. You're going to sleep better by addressing the things that are causing anxiety, the things you're worrying about, and attacking those head on, whether it be, you know, talking to a therapist or really diving into why that's bothering you. And then you kind of set up the situation and the environment to be optimal.